Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is my Stranger Things YouTube channel.
Today we're going to be talking about HIV, AIDS, and Vecna. Vecna is an allegory for HIV, AIDS.
My name is Steve Harrington.
My name is Eddie Munson, and together we're the
Duffer
Pink
Brothers.
Opaque. Ah, you're gonna do it too. Ah.
Joyce, drive!
Joyce, drive!
In season 1, episode 1, Joyce drives!
Joyce, drive!
2. The first location that establishes the character of the town of Hawkins.
Indiana.
The town itself can be interpreted as a character within itself. But the character of this town is defined by a nostalgic projection of suburbia that is uncritically displayed, and while superficially criticized through the character of Will's brother, was Mike's sister, Nancy, and Jonathan's exchange in episode 6, 7,
I guess 5.
5.
They moved to the end of a cul-de-sac and started their nuclear family.
You can see that this is not, in fact, critical, as the character of the neighborhood is never attributed to any of the horror depicted in the show, instead it being extradited to the US government. However, the US government itself as a body is not presented critically, as it is presented as one half of the Cold War, with the Soviets also being presented as farcically and ontologically evil / ridiculous and doomed to fail. Thus, the modernist perspective on communism is being retroactively applied to Cold War imagery without criticism of the Cold War imagery depicted. The figure of the lab, the character of the lab itself, and the evocation of MK Ultra is also uncritically applied, as there is as the individual of Vecna himself, who is just born wrong, born evil, as demonstrated in season 4, rather than the experimentations or unnaturalism of the social setting
A deeply unnatural structure
of the lab, and therefore of the constructed space of the town, is not blamed for the evil. It is just someone born evil, which is counterintuitive to the queering of the main cast, who are not rejected from the social environment, thus cannot be truly understood as queer. They exist within the social environment with superficial queered elements.
Midnight? Frog face? Or toothless?
However,
That's what's killing the kids!
if Vecna is to be understood as the biological queerness that is predatory towards children's bodies, specifically queer children's bodies, and contaminatory and biological and viral, he can be understood as HIV AIDS. Considering the 1980s setting, this presents a problematic depiction of the AIDS crisis, in which the inherent evil of the body upon which and from which the AIDS virus spreads is the root cause, and the contaminatory and predatory way in which it is afflicted upon others of this quid status is responsible, rather than the institutional, medical, and governmental neglect that such bodies are recipient to. This is pushed to the side and centers the uh, evangelical belief that uh, the AIDS crisis was a curse from God or punishment. Chapter 2. Eddie Munson. Chrissy, wake up. I don't like this. Chrissy, wake up. It's not auto-tuned in the show.
It's almost.
It's almost auto-tuned in the show. Eddie is presented as a cowardly figure.
I did the thing that I do now, apparently. I ran.
Whose character arc is of overcoming cowardice to run into his death for no reason. The self-sacrificial quid martyr who embraces his death by AIDS as a way of reducing the threat to others. Just die quietly. Do not make a fuss. Do not run and hide. This is particularly strange when he is the most outspokenly queer of the cast, who, rather than the other characters who hide their queer identities and receive torment without fighting, Eddie is presented as a defender or avenger figure.
A game where you throw balls into
the
laundry baskets.
Shut up, freak. Thus, we can see that Eddie is being inappropriately characterized through cowardice by running from a lynch mob.
I see danger and I just run.
The lynch mob forms because he, an already queered form, virtue of his gender presentation as intersexed in some capacity, and of his social presentation of rejective, of normative progression, his class presentation, and living in poverty, and his lifestyle choices that are queered in that they reject anti-drug campaigns of the era and anti-drug and anti-satanic terror. This is somehow characterized as cowardly because he runs from the lynch mob. The lynch mob that forms can be seen quite literally as a racial and sexual stand-in for real lynch mobs that happened in the time period to people that looked like that and behaved like that, where they were killed. And he was not being a coward to run away from them, considering the show makes great care to depict the police as also seeking to scapegoat Eddie for this crime. Specifically considering the body upon which the violence was committed. This is very problematic.
The satanic panic.
The satanic panic depicted is uncritically depicted. They are like, oh my god, the satanic panic, lol, isn't it funny that people used to think D&D killed you and made you evil, without being critical of what this meant culturally as a rejection of the queer youth and their rejections of normative Christianity and their creations of subculture, and from that the queer space of imagination and fantasy in which normative rules are inverted or subject to critique or abandonment. The Duffer Brothers are straight, and they made a show full of gay people, and yet there is no homosexuality depicted. There is no kissing or hand holding or romantic relationships depicted tangibly on screen at all. Despite the fact that there is heterosexual romance among children, teenagers, and adults within the show. Bad. Problematic. If Byla is endgame, it is still insufficient. Bad.
Bad.
They should have made Nancy and Bob have a slow burn lesbian romance after Steve and Nancy broke up with each other, and Jonathan should have had a slow burn enemies to lovers romance with Steve Harrington. And Mike should have inappropriately touched Eddie Munson if they wanted to develop his blossoming bi or homosexuality as a plot point.
And they only give Eddie a female love interest, which is weird because of how much they queer code him.
And bi-code him specifically through the way that he is bi-gender coded, through his physical appearance.
Because he's a side character, they very easily could have just put in a scene of him kissing a man, just to have done some explicit on-screen homosexuality.
Or depicted some form of homosexual feeling.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have to be homosexual relation. The thing is, with Will, the only homosexuality we see is him crying because of Mike, which is not explicit and is also not homosexuality. It is crying because of an interpersonal displacement that can be interpreted as platonic or romantic, and is not innately tied to homosexuality, which, considering sexuality and romance is a underlying and explicit theme in all of the characters, is unacceptable. They should have put porn in someone's room. That would have been they just needed to show Eddie Munson masturbating to men's bodies. Chapter 3. They made Hopper skinny in season 4. Boo!
Nobody liked that.
Do you think the camera is picking any of this up?
I have no idea.
Probably. Chapter 4. They made Joyce straight when she looks like a lesbian.
Yeah.
Boo!
They also make Max straight when she looks like a lesbian.
They treat that one black character weirdly.
Yeah. And they don't expand upon the fact that he's given... It feels almost incidental or accidental that they make his whole arc separate to the other characters' arcs, where he seems like a more oppressed character from the get-go, but then he's also way more aggressive.
He's
which
treated
feels
as
almost like stereotypical black characterizations in a way that's more problematic of anything. And then they give him a conformist arc where he tries to stop getting bullied and become popular and join the sports team.
And they don't give space to consider how either group, they treat the in-group, the white in-group of nerds, as his true belonging, his true calling, when it is not established as such. Whereas there is a black person on the sports team. There are multiple black characters on the sports team. And they do not at any point consider how he would feel about his in-group, his integrated in-group, being all white, or how it would integrate with a black identity, or how it would in some way cause insecurity about a black identity.
Yeah, they only talk about black identity explicitly one time in the show, and it's when they're dressing up as the Ghostbusters. And Mike's like, "You're supposed to be Venkman," and he's like, "I can't be Venkman." He's like, "Why? Because you're not black." But it's they're going at it from a very superficial, surface level place, which I guess is because the Duffer Brothers aren't black, but it's the same problem that applies to their what they do with their queer characters. Where it's you wanted to explore this thing and put it in your show, but you didn't really understand it in a way that meant that you could do that and do anything with it.
And you first of all, you can attempt writing these things even if you're not black. And second of all, they already get people that aren't them to write the episodes. They got a gay guy to write the Bylor episodes.
Sean Levi. I don't know if he's gay.
They got a Fujoshi to write the Bylor episodes. Fudanshi?
A male Fujoshi.
Fudanshi. They got a Fudanshi to write the Bylor episodes. Get a black person to write an episode. Just one. Just one. Now we get to chapter 5. They don't critically examine any of the sources of their inspiration and therefore cannot respond to them in any way because they don't understand them in the first place.
Which means that all of their themes don't really like go together properly because they're encountering themes incidentally instead of like understanding how writing works.
So they don't go anywhere also. They don't go together and they don't go anywhere. And it means that like they're aping the issues of they're being incredibly uncritical of the time period they're writing about. And they're being sort of snarkily critical about it as the space that they inhabit. They do not try to exit the space that they inhabit to look at it from the outside.
And because of the way that the show is written, it's very like it's almost entirely like it's because of the nostalgia thing that it has going. You can see in the one picture of them writing on the whiteboard all of their different references, and then they've crossed out where they've put them in the show, and it's like they're usually making explicit visual like on-screen references and homages that are just copying the stuff that is done in those things in their show, and you can see that really strongly in the first season with like E.T. and with Alien, and some of the Stephen King works. But what it means is that you just get a bunch of stuff about molestation that doesn't delve any deeper. They sort of stumble onto making a massive analogy about molestation. And I think they've done that by accident. Which is also why it veers so hard into the HIV/AIDS thing.
It's also why it's
Yeah.
thus concludes episode 1 of our vlog.
You didn't want to talk about Russia yet?
I don't want to talk about Russia.
Bye, chat.
Joyce.
Park.
Park.
Park the car, Joyce.
Joyce.
Park.
Break.
What? Cheers. Cheers, Dad. Cheers.